All right, we're ready to start on the hull, lower and upper. We're going to do the fenders or skirts, and we're also going to install the final drive gears and the axles. So I'll just go over the list of parts and stuff you're going to need, and then we can get to building. You're going to need all three pieces of your upper hull: your rear, your mid, and your front. You want to get zoom out here. You want to get all of your support material out. You got the two front lower hull pieces, the two rear, and your front and rear skirt pieces. In addition to that, we're going to go ahead and at this time install our, to focus here, we're going to install these small blocks for our magnetic suspension. I used to use M3 screws, but now I just use a piece of this support rod. Have our drive shaft, and then our drive shaft retaining C-clip. That's kind of the most finicky part. And then your left and right final drives. These drop down into the final drive housing. Okay, for screws, you're going to need two 30mm socket head cap screw. This is optional, but I recommend it. I'll show you where it goes. So the drive shaft gets a lot of stress, and I just put this portion in here so that you can fit this screw down in there. And it basically acts as just a brace inside to keep it from flexing. You're also going to need two of these 3M nuts, or M3 nuts, and then two of these button head. You can really use any M3 screw, but I'm using a 12mm. These are just going to go into the tensioner arm housing, or the track tensioner right here. There we go. And that's going, when the tensioner arm is in here, it's going to allow you to screw it down and push tension onto the tracks. Tools. Anytime I'm putting this stuff together, I like to keep a little bit of sandpaper, just a sharp little flathead to chip away at plastic, just razor, and then obviously some needle nose pliers. These will be used to cut this support, the support material for the suspension blocks. And then finally, you're going to need 6 magnets. These are 8mm by 3mm, so 3mm thick, 8mm across. You're going to put these in a positive to negative configuration in a couple of the holes I'll show later on, and that's going to hold down, that's going to hold the top down to the bottom. And you'll need, for this portion, these 4mm by 10 by 15. I'm not sure I got the order right, but it's 4mm thick. The inner diameter is 10mm and the outer diameter is 15mm. These are real popular on RC trucks, readily available on Amazon. And you'll need 4 of them. 2 go into each of the rear housing where the axle goes. All right, now that we've kind of covered the BOM for this portion, some of the build tips. This is pretty straightforward, but some of the build tips I want to go over before I just go into a time lapse is these edges. I'm going to end up using the sandpaper and the razor to make these edges perfect. Everything builds off of this, obviously, so if this is a little off, everything's just going to be a little off. The overall quality of your build starts here, so just take extra care. Use the table as necessary, so you've got a lot of flat edges to work with. Just to line things up, use the table. Use small amounts of glue just to get it to stick. I am just using some standard, hang on, I'm just using some standard cheap super glue. I think this was like $1.79 for 2 tubes. You can use some different epoxies or adhesives. I think this is just an industrial strength adhesive. So not even sure how popular this stuff is, but it's rubbery and it works real good if you can wait for the dry times. But for today, we're going to use the super glue because it dries super fast. It's really strong. And then later on, you can just kind of seep it down into the cracks bit by bit to really strengthen them up. This is, you don't need to buy this brand, but this is silicone grease. You can use any kind of lubricant you want on these PLA gears, but they need to be lubricated. That friction, if you don't get rid of that friction, is going to heat these things up and just melt the whole thing together. So make sure you get the silicone grease. This is going to go, for this portion of the build, is going to go into the rear housing. I keep talking about it, so here it is. There we go. Yeah, so right there is where your final gear is going to go, and I'll just pop it in there. And then your drive shaft's going to go through that, and there's some bearings in there. It's a lot of stuff in that small little spot, so it will build up some friction. Ended up using a little bit of this Loctite activator. See if I can show you that. There it is. Things are going pretty slow. So a little bit of this kind of acts like CA glue, or kicker on CA glue. All right, so we just pop the bearings in. Pretty easy, just press fit them in there. They might fall out, but you know, once you get the final drive gear and retaining clip in, they're pretty solid. Glue job. Glue job was a bit of a mess. I wish you better luck. I think some medium CA with some kicker would have done a lot better than this cheap super glue, but give it some time, give it some patience. The cheap super glue did just fine. Next thing we're going to move on to is the suspension blocks. There's little divots on this bracing rod. And we're just going to cut up little pieces of this, and we're going to slip those through the hull and into these holes and secure it all with super glue with the magnet opening facing down, so that when the suspension actions against it in a positive to positive or negative to negative magnet arrangement, it'll obviously oppose and give you your suspension action. So, let's go ahead and get started. All right, finishing up the interior. We have our magnetic blocks here, where you're just going to put your 8x3mm magnets. Got one in the rear for the lower hull, two in the front. Same for the upper hull. Two in the front, one in the rear. When it's all installed, just clip into place. Also, we need to install our track tensioner screws. It's just going to be the 3mm nut, and a small 3mm screw. The nut will go on the bottom side. There's a relief cutout, and then this will just go through the top. I'll just do that now. All right, finally, be able to put in our gears, our final drive gears. To identify that you have the right one, the teeth are going to go from down to up, from the outside to the inside of the hull. So this one will fit down in this side, going from down to up towards the center. The way this assembles is the axle slides through the gear, and then a C-clip will slide down next to the gear Once you're done, the axle should not pull out to the side, and it should spin with little or no friction. You just repeat the same process for the other side.